You don't expect to see life crack through prison dirt. The yard is nothing but concrete, fences, and dust that taste like rust in your teeth. But one morning I saw Pop kneel by the fence, press a single seed into the ground, and walk away like he'd just whispered a secret to the earth. Weeks later, when a fragile green sprout pushed through the dirt, the whole block stopped laughing. That tiny sprout became the only reason some of us believed we could still grow. At first I thought he was messing with us, like maybe hiding contraband. Nobody wastes time on dirt here. Dirt is just the grave we're all walking toward. But he came back the next day, poured a sip of water from his cup onto the same patch, then sat in silence watching the ground like it might breathe. The others laughed. "You farming ghosts, Pop," Monroe shouted. Pop didn't answer. He never gave the satisfaction. Day after day he crouched by the fence and poured his little sip. No shovel, no fertilizer, just patience. I thought prison had finally chewed him too long. Then one morning, something green pushed through. Fragile sprout, thin as a thread, trembling in the breeze. It looked too small to matter, but it mattered. Men who never paused mid-rec froze where they stood. We all stared like we were seeing color for the first time. Pop knelt and brushed dust gently from around it. His voice was barely audible. They listened. It sent chills down my back. Rumors started fast. Some said it was a weed, some swore it was a bean, others joked it was a magic beanstalk. Whatever it was, it lived. The guards noticed but didn't stomp it out. One sneered, "What's next? Tomatoes?" But his eyes lingered longer than they should have. The sprout straightened each day. Its little leaves unfolded like hands learning how to pray. None of us admitted it, but we checked on it constantly. Monroe crouched down once, pulling cigarette butts from around the base. When I caught him, he growled, "Shut up." That was the last time anyone teased him. Pop never bragged. Just kept tending, pouring his sip, shading it with cardboard scraps. When the sun was too harsh, I asked where he found the seed. Said Pocket's been holding it for years. Then he smiled like that was enough explanation. I didn't press. In here, sometimes a mystery keeps you breathing better than an answer. The sprout grew taller, a stem with stubbornness. It swayed but refused to break. Against steel and concrete, it looked like defiance. Guys started treating it like a lucky charm. Before fights, they'd glance at it. Before court dates, they'd mutter near it. Hope makes strange rituals. Pop tied the stem to a splintered stick with floss. "Support isn't control," he said softly. I didn't get it, but I remembered. I caught myself staring longer than I meant to. It wasn't just a plant. It was proof that something new could still start here. The sprout's first real leaves unfurled, bright against the dust. I swear the whole block breathed lighter that day. Pop hummed when he watered it, an old tune with no words. The sound made the yard feel less like a cage. One night, a storm rolled in, hammering the fence with rain. Y'all worried the sprout would be gone by morning. But it stood, bent low, leaves battered, but alive. That stubbornness felt like a victory for all of us. Men who never prayed started whispering to it. Apologies, confessions, names. The soil swallowed every secret without complaint. One guy buried a folded photo beside it. Another pressed a stone from his pocket. Pop just patted the dirt gently after each offering. The sprout turned into a small plant, a spine reaching higher each week. Its color didn't belong here, but it refused to leave. Even the guards got quieter. They didn't admit it, but some lingered by the fence during count. Nobody touched it. Pop told me he used to have a garden. Tomatoes, beans, sunflowers taller than his daughter. He looked away when he said her name. He promised her a tree of her own on her 10th birthday. But he wasn't there to plant it. The silence around his words was heavier than any lock. I stopped asking. I didn't need to. The plant in front of us was the story he couldn't finish. By midsummer, the sprout was knee-high, stem firm. We stopped calling it a sprout. It was becoming a tree. The yard smelled different if you stood close. Not bleach, not rust, just green, faint but real. Monroe started circling the tree during rec instead of the pull-up bars. He called it our kid once, and the name stuck. Pop kept teaching us without lectures. How to water slow so roots drank deep. How to brush dust from leaves like wiping a child's face. He never said it, but we knew. We were learning how to be gentle again. Something prison had beaten out of us. The tree grew past our knees, reaching toward the sun like it believed in something. Every inch felt like a gift. Men sat near it in silence. No fights, no shouting. Just quiet breaths shared with a tree that shouldn't exist here. Every fallen leaf became a funeral. We buried each one under the roots, whispering things we'd never say aloud. Pop said, "Trees don't judge. They just keep growing." His cracked hand smoothed the soil like proof. I found myself telling the tree about the night that ruined me, never spoken it aloud. The leaves trembled, and I felt lighter. The lieutenant started asking, "How tall now?" Pop answered in inches, like reporting chapters in a book. Even the warden passed by once, stopped longer than he needed, then walked away. His paws stayed behind. A storm snapped one branch. "We splinted it with tape and sticks," Pop whispered. "Healing takes time." The branch lived. The tree stood waist-high by fall, stronger, fuller, green against gray. It looked like rebellion rooted in dirt. We started measuring time by leaves instead of calendars. Growth meant survival. Survival meant one more chance. The chaplain came once and said, "It's beautiful." Nothing more, that was enough. A guard dropped coffee grounds by the fence one morning. He didn't look at us. His boots sounded lighter walking away. Pop smiled at the grounds. "Soil remembers kindness," he said. His voice cracked. The tree grew through winter drafts, shielded by plastic scraps we scavenged. Every breath it took reminded us to keep breathing too. Fights slowed down. Men sat with backs against the fence, heads bowed near roots. The air carried less violence. Pop's hand shook more often. He blamed old bones. His eyes never left the tree. I steadied his hand once when he watered. He didn't look at me, just said, "It's yours too." I couldn't speak. We started calling it the kid without irony. Not Pop's tree, not mine, ours. A child raised by men who thought they were done raising anything. When it dropped its first big leaf, we buried it with a photo someone slipped under the roots. None of us asked whose. Pop whispered, "Every ending feeds the next beginning." We repeated it like scripture. The tree's bark thickened, rough but real. Its spine straightened, teaching us to stand too. Guards who used to sneer now stood in silence. Some leaned on the fence longer than count required. Nobody interfered. Pop hummed to it every morning. The tune carried across the yard, softer than sirens, stronger than walls. I dreamed of green more often. Waking up to gray hurt worse, but the walk to wreck felt like walking toward hope. And Roe confessed. He watered it at night with stolen sips. "Didn't want it thirsty," he muttered. Nobody mocked him. The lieutenant once called it the only damn honest thing in here. His voice cracked halfway. We pretended not to notice. Pop said trees teach you patience because they don't rush to forgive. They just grow past what tried to break them. The kid's branches stretched wider. We measured our days in inches of shade. A new rumor said administration might cut it down. Another said the warden's wife asked to see it. Rumors are weeds, Pop shrugged. If they cut it, the roots remember. His eyes shone wet when he said it. The tree dropped more leaves. We buried each with a secret, the soil heavy with things unsaid. Winter hit hard. Frost rimed the fence. The kid bent but didn't break. We wrapped its base with scraps of cloth, guarding it like it was one of us. Maybe it was. Pop coughed more, moved slower, but still came every day. "Trees need consistency," he whispered. "So do men." The chaplain asked once if trees forgive. Pop said they don't forgive. They just keep growing. That was enough answer. The tree grew to shoulder height by spring. Leaves stretched like arms wide open. The yard smelled faintly of green again. Not bleach, not dust, just life, Pop said. His daughter used to hug trees like friends. He closed his eyes when he said it, like he could feel her arms again. I told the tree about my crime, about how I never meant for blood to spill. The leaves shook in the breeze. I felt lighter. Pop whispered roots like honest noise. His hand patted the soil like it was listening. The lieutenant asked, "How old is it now?" Pop said, "Old enough to teach." Even the warden paused again. Longer this time, eyes locked on the branches. Then he walked away. His silence felt like permission. We tied new branches to sticks, guiding without forcing. Support isn't control, Pop reminded us. That phrase followed me back to my cell. Maybe life outside these walls needed the same. The tree's bark roughened, its branches stretched higher. Against all odds, it had become something undeniable. The block gathered near it at wreck, shoulders loose, voices low. The tree anchored us in a way walls never could. One man pressed a photo of his mother under the roots. Another left a folded letter. Pop covered them gently, no questions. Leaves turned sunlight into shade, and for once prison felt less like a cage, more like a strange sanctuary. The chaplain said nothing on his next visit, just touched the bark and left. Sometimes silence is the truest prayer. Pop smiled faintly. It's growing into itself. His voice shook with pride, not weakness. The guards stood by the fence, arms crossed but quiet. They weren't mocking anymore. They were watching. The tree stretched above our heads, branches brushing the fence like it wanted out. We wanted out with it. Pop's cough deepened, but his hands never stopped tending. "It's almost strong enough," he whispered. I asked, "Strong enough for what?" He said, "To outlive me." My stomach turned heavy. The kid wasn't a sprout anymore. It was a tree. A survivor. Proof. Men leaned on the fence near it, shoulders touching, no words. The tree carried what we couldn't. Pop sat back on his heels, eyes closed, listening. "Hear it breathing?" he asked. We nodded, though we weren't sure. Maybe it was us breathing easier, for once. Maybe that was the same thing. Prison hadn't changed, but we had. Because of one seed, one sprout, one stubborn tree. I walked back to my cell with dirt under my nails, chest lighter. And, for the first time since I got locked up, I believed morning could be different. The tree was taller than all of us by the next summer. Its branches pressed against the fence like it was trying to feel what freedom tasted like. None of us could pass the yard without glancing at it. It cast a patch of shade no one dared fight over. Men who would have killed each other for a spot at the table just sat quietly side by side under its leaves. The air was different near it. Cooler, softer, not so sharp with bleach. If you closed your eyes, you could almost believe you weren't in prison at all. Pop sat under it most days, his back against the trunk. His hands shook more, but his eyes glowed every time he looked up at the branches. "Strong enough now," he whispered once. "It doesn't need me as much anymore." But he still showed up with his cup of water, steady as ritual. Monroe started guarding the tree like it was his own blood. If anyone got too rough near it, he was the first to step in. No one tested him twice. Guys from other blocks came during shared rec to see it. They'd stand awkward, trying not to look impressed. Then they'd walk away quieter than they came. The chaplain started holding his sermons beneath the branches. His words didn't matter as much as the shade above us. For once, silence felt holy. One lifer carved his brother's initials into a flat stone and buried it at the base. He didn't say a word. Pop just nodded like he understood the weight of it. The lieutenant walked the yard slower now, but he didn't rush us away from the tree. Sometimes he even paused long enough to look like he wanted to sit too. Pop's cough got worse. We pretended not to hear it. He hid his handkerchief badly, stained with red that wasn't rust. One day he asked me to water for him. His hand shook too much to hold the cup steady. When I poured, he patted my shoulder. "She'd be proud," he said. I didn't know if he meant his daughter or the tree. Maybe both. Maybe they were the same thing to him by then. The warden finally came down. He stood there, clipboard forgotten, staring at the tree like it was something out of a dream. Then he walked away without saying a word. After that, the guards never touched it. They stopped mocking, stopped pretending it didn't exist. The tree was part of the prison now. Men told stories under its shade. Not the kind of bragging you usually hear inside these were softer. Memories of kitchens, porches, fishing trips, birthdays, things we thought we'd lost. One guy admitted he hadn't spoken to his son in 10 years. He whispered an apology into the bark, like maybe the tree could carry it beyond the walls. Another man closed his eyes and laid both palms flat against the trunk. "Feels alive," he muttered, almost embarrassed. Pop just smiled. The roots pushed deeper, breaking the hard ground bit by bit, spread around the base like veins. The earth itself seemed to shift with it. Pop said, "Roots are promises. They don't run. They don't lie. They just hold on." Looked at us like he hoped we'd learn the same. When a branch broke in the wind, we treated it like a funeral, splinted it, whispered over it, checked it every day until it healed. I started spending every rec there, kneeling in the dirt, touching the bark, feeling my pulse slow. It was the only therapy I'd ever known. Pop told me more about his daughter, how she'd mail him drawings of trees with pink clouds for leaves. Letters he wasn't allowed to answer. She planted one without me, he said once, eyes closed, called it home. His voice cracked, and he didn't speak again for a while. The tree's shades stretched farther each week. It swallowed fights before they started. Men sat, leaned back, and just breathed. The lieutenant muttered once, "Best damn correctional program we've ever had." Nobody laughed. We all knew he was right. Pop showed us how to save fallen seeds, how to dry them, how to tuck them into little envelopes. "For tomorrow," he said. Tomorrow was a dangerous word in prison. But under that tree, it didn't feel impossible. We buried scraps of letters, drawings, even commissary wrappers under the roots, offerings, sacrifices, prayers. The soil took them all. Pop said every root remembers what it touches. When you're gone, the roots keep your story safe. The tree kept growing, shoulder height, then taller than the guards. It became something no one could ignore. Even men on death row sent kites asking how it was doing. News of the tree traveled faster than fights. The chaplain stopped preaching altogether under its branches. He just sat with us, breathing the same air. That was sermon enough. Pop's cough rattled harder. Still came every day. But sometimes he just sat and watched, too tired to move. One morning he pressed my hand to the bark. "Feel it," he said. "It remembers." I did feel it warm, alive, steady. He whispered, "When I'm gone, it'll keep telling the story." My throat closed. I couldn't answer. The tree dropped its first real fruit that falls. Small, green, bitter. But we split it like it was gold. Each bite tasted like sunlight we weren't supposed to have. We chewed slow, savoring what freedom might taste like. Pop smiled when he saw us eating. "Didn't think I'd live to see it bear," he murmured. His eyes shone wet. The lieutenant even tried a piece, chewing thoughtfully. "Better than chow," he muttered, almost smiling. The warden stood beneath it again, longer this time, his face unreadable, but he didn't order it gone. That was all we needed. The roots cracked more concrete. Tiny fissures spreading like a map. Proof that even stone can't hold forever. Pop grew weaker. Some days he couldn't make it to the yard. I carried his stool out for him, so he could still sit under the shade. He looked smaller under the branches, but also more complete. Like he'd finally built the bed he promised his daughter. The tree wasn't just his anymore. It was ours. Every man in the block had touched it, spoken to it, trusted it with secrets. Fights nearly vanished. You can't swing fists under a tree that holds your confessions. It made us accountable, Pop told me once. It isn't about the tree. It's about remembering we can still grow. His eyes burned into mine. That night I dreamed of walking out of prison into a forest. Not freedom, but belonging. The dream felt possible for the first time. The chaplain started calling it the tree of the block. The name stuck. Even guards used it quietly. Seeds dropped and we collected them like treasure. Pop made us promise to plant them, even if just in secret corners. "Every tree needs kin," he said. "Don't let it be alone." His voice was fading, but the conviction was sharp. The kid from C Block cried openly under the branches once. No one mocked him. We all understood. Pop's cough stole more of him each week. He smiled less, but when he looked at the tree, the pride never left. The lieutenant started asking about him. "He's the reason this place isn't burning down," he admitted once. The tree towered over the yard by then. Strong, undeniable. Its shade stretched wide enough for all of us. Pop whispered, "It'll outlive me. That's enough." He leaned back, eyes closed, listening to the leaves rustle like applause. That night, the block was quieter than I'd ever known. We all knew what he meant. The tree stood, strong and rooted, carrying every story we'd buried in its soil. And Pop, smaller each day, kept coming back, as if making sure it knew the way without him. Kept coming back, as if making sure it knew the way without him. Pop looked thinner every week. His cough sounded deeper, wet, like gravel rattling in a tin. But he still came to the yard, still sat under the tree. Some mornings he couldn't stand, so we carried him on a stool and set him by the trunk. He'd pat the bark with trembling fingers, whispering words only the tree seemed to understand. The tree shaded him like it knew he needed the comfort. Its branches bent just enough to cover him, leaves brushing against his shoulders. Men gathered around without speaking. Nobody dared make a joke. The yard felt like a chapel every time Pop closed his eyes under those branches. One afternoon, he motioned me closer. His hand shook as he pressed a packet into my palm. "Seeds," he whispered. "Don't lose them. They're tomorrow." I clutched the packet like it was contraband, like it was life itself. My throat burned, but I only nodded. That night, Pop didn't return to his bunk. He died in his sleep, quiet, folded into the silence he carried for years. The news spread slow, like it hurt to say his name. Men sat stunned, staring at the floor, at the walls, anywhere but each other. At rec the next morning, we carried a small bundle wrapped in cloth to the tree. We buried it at the roots, his handkerchief, his cup, and the packet of seeds he gave me. Nobody gave a speech. Nobody needed to. The silence was heavier than words, broken only by the rustle of leaves above us. The guards stood back, watching, none interrupted. Even the lieutenant bowed his head for a moment. After that day, the tree became Pop's voice. Every leaf carried him. Every shadow felt like his presence. I started watering it in his place. Others joined Menro, the kid from C Block, even men who'd never cared before. It was no longer one man's ritual, it was ours. The roots pushed deeper, cracks spreading wider across the yard floor. The tree wasn't just surviving, it was winning. The chaplain called it a miracle. The warden called it a problem, but neither touched it. Nobody dared. Seasons passed. The tree grew taller than the fence. Its branches reached for the sky like arms breaking chains. We buried more things at its base. Photos, letters, scraps of cloth, each one a story Pop would have listened to. The roots became a library of our grief. Fights stopped almost completely. Men respected the tree too much to disgrace its shade with violence. It was the safest place in the yard. I told it everything I couldn't tell anyone else. My regrets, my shame, my small scraps of hope. The leaves trembled in answer. The lieutenant once whispered, "That old man changed this place more than any of us." Nobody argued. The fruit came again, more than before. Bitter, but edible. We split it carefully, each bite a communion. Pop would have laughed, I thought. He'd have said it was enough. And maybe it was. When parole came for me years later, I didn't want to leave the tree behind. It felt like leaving family. The night before my release, I sat under its branches with my hand against the bark. "Thank you," I whispered. I swear the leaves stirred like they heard. Walking out the gates, the hardest part wasn't the chains coming off. It was not looking back. I carried Pop's seeds in my pocket. Years passed outside. The world moved faster, louder. But in my garden behind a small apartment, I planted those seeds. One sprouted. It wasn't the same tree, but it carried the same silence, the same stubborn green. And every time I watered it, I heard Pop's voice. Support isn't control. One day I went back. I stood outside the prison fence, older, free, but still tethered. The tree was there, taller, stronger, shading half the yard. I saw men gathered beneath it, shoulders touching, voices soft. It's just like we used to. The tree outlived us, just like Pop promised. I pressed my hand against the fence, metal cold, heart warm. The tree's branches swayed in the wind, and I could almost hear him again. Every ending feeds the next beginning, and I believed it.